Welcome to The Purple Door, a podcast for young women by young women, with your host, Shanique Lowndes. Each week, we deliver the best hard-hitting analysis of topical issues that affect young women and how they deal with them. Today, we're going to be having another very fruitful, very productive discussion. I have four beautiful ladies here with me. I'm going to just give them a chance to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Danielle Taylor.
Hi, my name is Asarna Tomlinson-Smith.
My name is Crystal.
And I'm Cheyenne Facey.
Welcome, ladies, and I'm Shanique Lowndes. Now, we're going to be discussing today the role of women in the church. This one is quite big. It's quite relevant to our time, and we're going to be exploring what is it that is really expected of us in the church as women. How much can we take on to ourselves as women? You know, what are the lines that are drawn between the roles that men play and the roles that women play, and how those have changed over time, and what the Bible has to say about how as women we ought to function in the church of God. So I'm going to start with Crystal. Crystal, what are your ideas about how women function in God's church?
Okay, so what I think is that women, they are known to be the one that, take care of the children, encourage them and so forth and so on.
All right, so women are the nurturers of the children. Any other thoughts, Daniel?
They're also like the supporting role, the behind the scenes, the helping, the running behind, getting stuff done that needs to be done.
Okay.
As Seventh-day Adventist women, we are equal to that of our male counterparts.
Right.
We are called to service. Right. We are called to spread the message just the same.
So women have a very active role to play in the mission of the church. While it is unique, and I'm hearing some things coming out from what Crystal and Daniel said about being the nurturers, being helpers, playing a supportive role, but we are just as important to the mission of the church as the men. And men are often seen as the leaders, the ones who are in charge and so on. When the church started, looking into the New Testament, Acts, Romans, the story of the apostles, do we see women playing important roles there?
Yes, we do see women play very important roles, especially like Phoebe, Esther and
Dorcas.
Right. They played a very important role because they evangelized the people there in the world and also in their homes and to children also, because it tells us that women can reach certain people that men can't reach.
Truth.
Which would bring more souls to Christ and make a difference in the world, especially like in spending money in the needs of others, in giving, in more sympathetic than in the church.
So sometimes women are the ones who see to the practical needs of those who we try to witness to, as opposed to just preaching the word or teaching them, what is in the Bible and so on. Because as we saw through Jesus' ministry, it's twofold. You meet the practical needs of those who are seeking after God, and then eventually you get into the more theological and, Bible-based aspect of it. But in our church now, there are varying views that float around about what women really are supposed to do and not supposed to do. At this point, we have women in just about every leadership role in the church you can think of, or women head departments, or women are elders. We even have a female pastor in our conference. Though not ordained, she is a pastor. Mm-hmm. How do we feel about the fact that our women seem to be fitting just as well the roles that our men have played over the years that have been male-dominated, eldership and pastoring and so on? How do we feel about the fact that women are now in those roles and functioning in those roles?
If women are properly trained
yes,
to take that role, a leadership role, it would be good, because woman has a very important role to play. And it might seem so simple, but it's very important.
How do we, though, as individuals, decide as a woman, as a Christian person, how do we decide what our role is?
The decision has to be one that is spirit-led, one that has to be scriptural. So if we're saying that this is what we are going to do, there should be something that guides us.
Right. Well, the beautiful thing about the Bible is that while the Bible speaks a lot about the men of the time, because it was the culture of the biblical day not to really speak much about women. So even in counting a crowd, the men were counted, the women and children were not. In Romans, we hear of this young lady, Phoebe. And I want to spend some time talking about Phoebe because Phoebe is the biblical character that is our titular character for the Phoebe initiative that started this program, the Purple Door. So our ladies between the ages of 18 and 35 have a place now, a defined space in the women's ministry department in our churches and in our conference. But Phoebe, as mentioned by Paul in Romans, was playing a very important role. She was taking letters to different churches, and Paul wrote and said, I recommend her. She's an excellent worker. I expect you to treat her well and give her all the courtesies that you would give anybody, any man really, at the time. And I want us to understand that as women, while our role by virtue of who we are made to be, nurturers, people who like to make things pretty and nice and to make everyone comfortable. And we see those roles like deaconess and so on dominated by our women. And, you know, you find the women always cleaning up and fixing up and putting the doilies on the podium and all of that. We do not want any woman to feel limited to that particular role. Because over and over we see in the Bible women are called to do greater things than that. Because I want to look at Esther a bit. Esther was called to be a queen. But you can't have a queen without a king. You understand? And so even in her role as a leader, as ruler of a geographical space, she related directly to her king. And the Spirit led her in functioning as he would have her to save her people, to relate to her king. So she invited her king to a feast. And we know women like to feed people. So we use what God has given us as he leads us to do what he wants us to do.
So basically the Bible has brought out that women and men should work synonymously.
Should work together, yes.
When the both parties work together, it's like it's unstoppable.
Right. That is how God created us to be as man and woman, because woman really is the helpmeet to the man. The essence of our role is not to usurp the men or to make them obsolete, because they cannot be. In God's design, in God's church, men cannot be obsolete. However, as women, we ought to rise above some of the negatives that the world has taught us, that we are to be at the back and we are to, not do anything more than this little corner that we have and box us in. No, we have to allow ourselves to be empowered through the Spirit, through what God has put in us, because all of us are different. And while there are some women who are very feminine and like to do the girly stuff, there are some of us as women who are strong leaders, and that is how we are made.
And once God sees it fit to use you, he will use you.
But I want us to think about our role as women as supportive. There's this idea that we are secondary to the men. How do you feel about this idea that as women we are secondary to the men?
We are supporters of their calling, right? So our roles are different. So we as women, we go out in the field as our men would, right? But our men would do possibly the preaching portion of it, while we would help to bring these persons that have been preached to, right, into church, and to also keep them there. So we help with retention. We help with the practical portion of the community, right, the outreach. So if it's a case where we find that they are in need, right, we women are the ones that would help with that portion of it, and not necessarily our men, because our men are not sometimes not so in tune to that portion.
And that is true. And it doesn't make them any less suitable for leadership. It just means that God is wise in making us as women the one who are more inclined to that particular aspect of the ministry. And we could continue the conversation by speaking about in our churches, what are some of the practical ways that women function as support? So I will give an example. A preacher comes to preach, and most times the preacher is a man, but it's normally the deaconess or some female elder that makes sure he has water, that sees to it that if there's special lunch, his lunch is sorted out and so on. What are some other things that as women we do to complement the leadership role that our men take in our churches? Even on a personal level, we're all church women. What are some of the things that we do and that come naturally to us that we've been led by the Spirit to do as women who support the role of the men?
Have you noticed that women are more generally prayer warriors?
Yes.
I've seen so many women praise and all of that because their role is to pray for their family, to keep the family in one accord. To even in the church you have prayer warriors, and most likely females praying. They're praying. Females are more praying people.
So women are more likely to be the ones praying. I want to touch on some things that may be a little bit disruptive to even how we as women among ourselves. So we've established that we're not secondary to the men. We're supportive. We're important. We have a role to play. But sometimes we find that even among ourselves as women, we don't understand how we ought to relate to each other in helping each other to fulfill these roles. And you touched on it a little bit. Sometimes I think our older women are not as keen on being friendly guides, and I'm very deliberate in using the word friendly. Friendly guides to our younger women. There is this idea that because they're older and more experienced, of course, that they like the pride of place that age allows them. But I don't think sometimes our older women are so keen on helping in a loving, friendly way our younger women to come into their own as mothers, as wives, as women in the church. And I think sometimes we are a little bit neglectful in understanding that as the younger women come up, the older women ought to give them more and more space to develop themselves and to explore their talents and to use their talents. So I think sometimes as women we ought to be mindful that is a lot of us. The church is a great percentage. More than half the church population is women. And we are so replete with talents and, different personalities and so on, that as a group, women together now, not to discard the men, but as women together to help each other to fulfill the different roles that we can fill. True, to be supportive of each other in understanding and fulfilling the roles.
Instead of in bashing and tearing up. Because we have that too,
Yeah, we have that tendency. And it's unfortunate that it's found among women of God. But we are human, and many times the younger women are the ones that suffer for it.
Yes, because they don't understand that it's a process. Everyone goes through a process. Even young females go through a process. Because they pass through that process, they feel that they weren't behaving this way or doing the certain things that young people do nowadays. They too can admit that they were doing it, but sometimes they're not bold enough to come and say, I used to do this, but this is not the right way to do it. You can, there's a different way, there's a different escape for this. So,
and on the flip side, I think sometimes our older women are very reluctant to accepting some new things that younger women will come with. Because every generation is to build on what the former generation would have left behind. True. If I grow up and do everything exactly as my mother would have done it, then I wouldn't have added to what she would have given me. And I think sometimes as young people, as young women especially, we are made to feel like we're out of line, out of place, to put forward new ideas, to take different approaches to the same problems, and I think as women we need to have more conversations about how we allow the young to complement the old and allow the old to guide the young. I think sometimes there's too much of a clashing
Yeah.
There's a clashing of personalities, there's a clashing of ideas among our women, especially across generational lines, across age barriers. And I would love to see us more allowing the Spirit to help us to come together. The old with their experience and wisdom, and the young with their exuberance and their strength and talent and everything that we come with as younger women, to really allow the role of women across the church, landscape, to be more colorful and more effective.
True.
You will see a growth in the church.
Exactly.
You will see more churches becoming more diverse, more active, and more involved in seeing each and every person develop and grow spiritually, and to find their own and find their place where they can grow and help others to grow in that same space. Positively, it'll be a positive environment to be in. You won't feel affected by it, but it will become infectious.
Yes, contagious.
and everyone around you, because you also say, if you shine your light in the darkness, people will come to you. So that light, if everyone around you is just shining light and shining, this positive message that, look, we're all young women, we're all women, whatever age you might be, but we want your ideas, your thoughts, and see you grow in this space, and not have to, step back and probably tone down what you're saying to meet someone else's expectations, or to meet someone's ideal view of what you should be, but what you are to be.
True. And you really become who you are to be when you allow God to lead you, because He's the one that made us, and He knows what He wants us to be. So I don't want any woman or anybody listening to this conversation to feel that we're trying to say, oh, women have a very specific defined role and they're to stay in that box within those lines. Because if you are led by God as a woman to fill any role at all, or as a man to fill any role at all, it is quite okay to do that in the power that God has given you. Because there are some of our men who don't necessarily fit the mold of being a preacher, but he's the kind of man who will come in the kitchen and lift up the heavy pots, move them from one fire to the next as the women may need. So in every aspect of church life, there's a place for man and there's a place for woman. You're having work day, the men go and do the work, but the women go and cook. But suppose you have a young woman. Well, I know, let's put a wrench in this. Suppose you have a young woman who is not particularly interested in the fireside. She would prefer to take a roller and help a young man to paint a wall. We can't allow our young women who don't necessarily fit a particular mold to feel that there's no place for them in the church. And what about the young man who don't necessarily want to be lifting the blocks and so on, but he would prefer to help the women in the kitchen by the fireside, as I said, to move the pots or to build the fire or whatever? We have to understand that while there's a role for man as individuals, God allows us to go where we need to go. As the conversation continues, I want us to get a little bit more personal now. What are some of the things that may have challenged you in the past or even the present as it concerns your particular role in your church, or even as a Christian woman? What are some things that have been not so clear to you, or how have you seen God lead you to do things in your church, in your spiritual life, that probably of your own you would not have risen to the occasion to do as a Christian woman?
Well, for me, I grew up in the Adventist church, right? From a tender age, I was put on the stage to sing. I didn't know I could have sing, but my brother taught me a song, and I just do it. Well, I was like in the background when I was much younger, because nobody really realized the talent that I have. So we were like pushed aside sometimes and put up the people who they think is were willing to do so. And I used to have a problem with that going to church, because I used to feel like I'm pushed aside, like I can't do anything, right? But after, placed on that stage to do that performance, I really come out of the box. Even though, my name is Cheyenne, and I tend to be shy.
That's a good one.
I tend to be really shy. So that was a icebreaker for me, to just be up there facing the crowd and, building that confidence. So I used to face with that, neglecting part.
Okay. Asarna?
I cannot say that I share the same notion based on that I am not born Adventist, but grown Adventist. right? But I come from a church that is very supportive, right? That looks out for young people. One that says, would you like to do a scripture?
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to help with the cooking? Right? Would you like to do service? Would you like to do AY? Would you like to do Sabbath school? So I've never been boxed in.
You have always been given opportunities.
Given opportunities.
Awesome.
So
that is so good, and I'm hoping that is the experience of many, if not most or all of our young women out there in the general, populace of our church. So quickly, Crystal, any thoughts on the matter?
Okay, for me, I'm a very shy person. I don't really talk much, but sometimes I just talk. It depends on the mood that I'm in. I've been baptized from I was 13 years of age, and the church family normally asks me to do things, as was said by my sister. And I'm still shy, but I'm coming out of my shell.
Awesome.
Slowly but surely. I'm coming out of my shell, and I just want to give God thanks for that, because I feel like I have more confidence in myself, and that's a good thing.
Awesome.
With the help of the church family.
Praise the Lord.
Great.
It's just great to know that as women, each of us, we're coming into our role, and we have defined in some kind of way what is it that as women we're called to do, but at the same time we know that God is able to take us to places where not evil people would have us go.
So, growing up in church, I've always enjoyed, my decorating behind the scenes. And as I said earlier, the supportive role, to fill the gap wherever needed be. And, my church is a very small church, so, everybody's involved in everything. And a couple of years ago, I was kind of put in the leadership position. I had to step up. And the support that I got from the persons around me was very encouraging, and it helped me to blossom in my church and have a voice for the young people around me. I am the AY leader there. So this constant, although I do sometimes want to step back and, let someone else, be in the front and, help them to also get that same encouragement, that same development that I got, to just work at being who they can be and find themselves. And yeah, I do always, want to go back and, help someone else or be in the background organizing everything and making sure that things run smoothly. I do sometimes still have to step forward and do what I need to do to encourage another one to teach a lesson or to whatever whatever I'm called to do.
That is great. And I guess the takeaway from this is really that as women, there is so much for us to do in God's church. And while there are things that are typical of women to do because of how we are made and so on, no woman, no man should feel limited by any defined gender role per se, but to just allow the Spirit to lead you, because He's the one that has put the different things in you to allow you and empower you to do whatever work it is that He has assigned you to do in God's church. Thanks for listening to The Purple Door. This podcast is made possible by the Women's Ministry Department of the Central Jamaica Conference for listeners like you. Visit them at centralja.org. Like The Purple Door on Facebook and Instagram, and leave your comments and questions. And remember to subscribe so you never miss a show. Join us next week for another great discussion. Until then, be blessed.